Tonight we have Bill Kloepping. He's going to be teaching us how to photograph your work and talk about how to set up the light boxes, set up the cameras, and with that, Bill Kloepping.
Okay. Um, that's going to be a problem. Um, well, I'm Bill Kloepping, and I'm a member of the Dallas Club and the Hunt County Club. And I started taking photographs, in the late 1970s. And I tried to be a professional photographer for a while, and then I realized I had to deal with people who acted like me, and I gave it up. About 5 or 10 years ago, I kind of got into taking pictures with a light box, and I'd done it the hard way before, using multiple flash units and flash meters, and that was really tough. This makes everything a lot easier, okay? So most of my talk is going to be on a PowerPoint presentation with a little bit of show and tell in between. And if we could go to the PowerPoint, we'll just start it right up. And maybe this will work. Okay, and I've got this is just my splash slide, so no big deal here. Feel free to ask questions, just scream out questions at any, if you have any, and I'll try and answer them as good as I can. But first thing, a basic disclaimer is I am not out to take pictures of something to put in a museum. The art may go in a museum, but the picture is not intended to go in the museum. I take what I call record shots. I'm there to document the piece of work, not to make a beautiful picture. And if you want beautiful pictures, there are lots of things you can do. I just don't do it. So if you came hoping to get something that you can put in a museum, figure out how to take pictures for that, you ain't going to get it out of me. Sorry. But as far as it goes, a lot of people will say, oh, you need to do this or you need to do this. There is no right way to take photographs. It really depends on what it is that you're trying to get out of your photograph and what you're going to use it for, as to how much you have to do. Okay, magazines like AAW magazine, you want a better quality picture. But if you're just trying to put something on a web page, just say, hey, I just turned this. You don't have to have AAW quality or magazine quality photographs. So what you're going to do with the picture is important as far as how you go about taking the picture. Again, at the bottom, this is not a how-to presentation. Everybody has different equipment, different lighting. I can't go into all of that. And so what I'm going to do is show you or tell you about things that you do need to think about when you're trying to take a picture, take pictures of your work. And it's fairly comprehensive, and the idea here is I'm going to buzz through these slides fairly quickly. The slide presentation has been reduced to a 1.8 megabyte PDF file that will be out on the website, and so you can feel free to just download it. And so if you don't have to memorize what I'm giving you here. Get it off the PDF file. Any questions before I head on? Okay. Lighting is one of the most important things that you have to pay attention to when you're taking pictures of your work. The lighting needs to be able to provide good color rendition. When you're dealing with a piece of Purple Heart or a piece of I don't know, rosewood, you don't want it to look brown. You want it to look like the color that it's there. So you want faithful color rendition. As far as lighting is concerned, you want to make sure, there's a little diagram here, that the light is a large area of light that on your object. It reduces shadowing that you're going to get. So you want a very large diffuse light, which is why, well, I'll get into that in a little bit here. You want the light coming from different directions. You don't want it a spotlight coming down, and that gives you better uniform lighting, because again, I'm out to document the picture, not make some dramatic statement. I want to document your object, and so it's got to be well lit, and you want it to be so that you can say, oh yeah, that is a three-dimensional object. So you don't want something that makes it look like it's flat. Okay, now I'm going to go. Yes, sir. Oh, it is very important. all of them. I'll get into that. But yes, the color of the light is very important. I've got a little slide right after this where I discuss that. Okay, I'm going to go through a number of different lighting scenario or setups that people use. And first one is natural lighting, sunlight. And it's great. And I'm not going to read these slides to you, or I'm going to try not to, but I'll get the highlights of them. And download the PDF file if you want to read all the details. But natural sunlight, real cheap. Just get out there, put a little backdrop, put it in there, and just start taking pictures. You don't need anything special. Your camera is good with taking pictures of sunlight. The problem is that it's not, the color of the light doesn't stay the same throughout the day. And hello, I thought you said this was going to work. Would you advance the slide for me, Ken? This has quit working. Yeah. Go ahead and advance. Can you manually advance? And I'll talk through that one. Well, as you can see on the slide. Oh, did I do? Oh. Well, as you can see on the slide that is supposed to be up there, temperature or the temperature of light is measured in degrees Kelvin, and so you'll see, 3,500 degrees, 5,500, 10,000, a lot of things. The lower the number, the more reddish the picture will be. The higher the temperature, the more bluish it will be. And as you can see on here, the reason I've got this slide here is basically to show that under natural lighting, sunrise and sunset, 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Kelvin. You get into heavily overcast sky, 9,000 to 10,000 degrees Kelvin, a very wide range. So what that tells you is that you go outside with your natural lighting, and it's going to, depending on what time of day it is, you're going to have red light, blue light, or anything in between. And so your color balance will change. That's something that's important if you're trying to get good color. Next slide. Ken, next slide. Okay, so traditional studio lighting where you have modeling lights with strobes built into them. That's a real nice way to go if you can afford it. You get excellent lighting control, and you don't have to worry about ambient light near as much. But the problem is, it's expensive, and I'm not even going to guess how much a proper system will be. But you can scale it. So if you need something to take pictures of a huge car, you can get sufficient lights to do that. Or down to just little tiny bowls, you can do that as well. But it takes a lot of floor space and a lot of money to buy all the equipment. Go ahead and shoot to the next one, and then see if you can figure out how to fix that, because we got a lot of slides to go through. Huh? Oh, okay. 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 The next is one of the more popular ways to light your objects, and that's using these translucent light boxes. And basically, I have a couple here that I brought along just to show you what we've got. And this is one right here, and it's self-contained light box with a. They always come with this shade in here with a little gap that you can put your light or your camera through. I never use it, but I put it there just to let you know it's there. Basically, inside here, you have an area where you can put a backdrop of whatever color that you want, and put your object, object in there, and then you can set up your camera to take pictures. These are done, the lighting is done, in this case, I'm using two lights that will illuminate the sides and basically create a large soft lit area that will illuminate the object. And since you can't really see, I'll just put this down here, raise it up. pretend like that's what I was actually trying to take a picture of. Huh? No, I'm good. I've got this in here. Okay, and so now there's a couple of issues when dealing with these light sheds. Now this is a fairly large one. You can get them fairly small at various sizes. They're all very inexpensive. Most of them will cost under $100. Lighting, not critical. But it'll take a little bit of practice moving around and to figure out the best position for the lights. I typically just use one light on each side. So some people will also put a light on top, and you can put lights in a lot of different positions, and that is something you just have to play with. There's no magic rule for this. Okay, one thing, these are made of lightweight material, and you can get them too hot, and they will burn. So this one, it says that no more than a 500-watt light. And so I just happen to have these two lights that they're quartz halogen work lights from Home Depot, 500 watts. And then I can turn on the second bulb and I get 750, which I'll use later. But so there's that. The other issue with these is their size. If you've got a small one, that limits the size of the object that you can put in here. For this particular one, this large ball there may or may not work, and so that would be difficult in this. So anyway, I'll leave that there. Does anybody have any questions on the? Yes.
Those are just halogen bulbs?
Yes, it's just quartz halogen work light, and they're pretty low, maybe 3,000 to 4,000. But they work perfectly fine if you know what you're doing, which I hope to tell you in a little bit. I'll tell you how to use the lights and correct for the color in a little bit. Yes? Yes. Oh, yes. I've got a whole slide on backdrops. Give me a second, I'll get to that. The second type of translucent box is what I call light sheds. They have different names. This I got at SWAT last year. Sorry. Boy, that's rough. Okay, I got these at SWAT last year, and what they are is it's just, I call them soft boxes. They have a compact, well, I'll show everybody but the camera. Oh, we do have the camera. They have a daylight balanced compact fluorescent inside in nice reflective and a large area, and they make for excellent soft lighting that you can put and you can arrange them around. I don't have a lot of room up here, so just pretend like this is professionally done. One thing I forgot to mention, this light shed that I had originally, it packs down into a small round pouch, okay, and which is easy to carry around, but the lights, you have to make arrangements for the lights separate. These little guys pack down, each one packs down into a small little sleeve, and then the light bulb and this diffuser material fits in this. So two of these will get you this light set up. And I bought it on a whim last year at SWAT, and I have to admit, after using it, I really like these. Doug will be I'll put a pitch for him, even though I didn't talk to him yet. He will be at SWAT talking about photography and should be selling these. And so if they're in your price range, I like them a lot. Yes. I call them light sheds, but Doug Baldwin, photo.com, I'm not going over there. If you come up afterwards, I have his little brochure, and there's also some information on how to find it. Light sheds under $100. These things, each one of these, $80 to $100 each. And so this was under $100. You can get them all different, depending on the size, and the price will vary. So these are a little more expensive, but they come with the lights, and I like them. They're quite nice. Okay, so I just brought these along, like I said, for show and tell purposes. I'm not actually going to take a picture with it because I've got too much to do here. Can we go back to the slides, see where we are? Oh, yeah, I showed these, and there is a couple of disadvantages. Well, first of all, you get pretty good lighting control with these. That less space, it takes up less space than traditional studio lights, but you get a problem with light intensity or different light sources, ambient light sources. So if you're using daylight fluorescence and you've got regular fluorescence turned on, you have two different colors of light illuminating your object. That's going to cause you problems. So anytime you have ambient light, that's going to be a real issue that you got to deal with. Anyway, next slide. Okay, next one is the reflective light box, and I'm going to have to put it together for you. If I had more room, I would have had it already, but it doesn't take long. This is something that I did years ago, and yes, of course, now it decides to give me a hard time. Anyway, I built this years ago, and it works fairly well. And stop that. I got it. It's just... And what we've got here, this is a very inexpensive thing. It costs well under $100 to build. All it is just a few pieces of wood, some foam core, and a $6 pull shade from Walmart. And then I put inside the box, I can get it here, one light, facing more or less forward and up a little bit. And boy, it's bright. There's 750 watts in here. The thing about these reflective light boxes is they have solid sides that are opaque, and they reflect. So one light inside bounces all around, and it illuminates the object fairly well. You don't have a whole lot that you can do with this in terms of directionality. You can get, which I forgot to bring, a bounce light or bounce card. Is just an external card. You can make them out of foam core, put aluminum foil over something. There's anything that reflects light if you want to bounce some of the light from a different direction. But this is what I used to take pictures of SWAT. And for 3 years, I took pictures of the Instant Gallery. A number of you have seen them, and it takes pretty good pictures. And so this is also one issue being the size of this. You're not going to be able to take pictures of something bigger than this. But basically, I've been using these for quite a while, and they work very well. And I think this one costs, $50 to make. Depends on the cost of the foam core. Can we go back to the slide? Okay, another issue with, or nice thing about these is they take very little space. Basically, it's the footprint of your box. That's all the space it takes. You don't need extra room on the sides for your lighting. And so, I'll just go ahead and leave this here. Because the box is solid, your external lights are not going to get in quite as much, so you have less problem with the ambient light control. But you don't have very much control over your lighting. So all of these systems have positives and negatives. Which one do you use? Oh, sorry, we've got one more. Next slide. Is flash units, using your on-camera flash and external flash units on the side with umbrellas. That can be done. That's how I did it originally when I was back in my college days. I was using multiple flash units with slave circuitry and sync cables. It works. You can make it work. Problem is, it's very difficult to get your illumination uniform and get it so you don't have harsh shadows. So I'll just leave it at that. You can do it. I won't do it anymore. It's too tough. Okay, so which one should you use? And that is probably the hardest question. And I can't tell you because it depends on the camera you've got, the equipment you've got, whether you've got lighting already, and what kind of software you're going to use to get your pictures processed. Okay, but one thing I can give you is these things. If you can set what's called custom white balance in your camera, use any lighting that you want. The halogen lights, daylight, fluorescent, regular fluorescent, it doesn't matter. As long as you can set your a custom white balance, you're good to go. If you can only set the auto, if your camera, and sometimes your cell phones will have an auto white balance feature, if that's all that you've got, then you need to do some testing to see will that work with the equipment that you've got. You never know until you test it. The other is important in my book is if your camera supports raw image files, and I'll talk about that in a minute, then you can use any lighting that you want. Okay, and that's an important point that if your camera uses raw files, you should be using that. You'll love it, and I've got some explanation of that later. Little asterisk down at the bottom, you do not want to mix different colored light sources. And I'll tell you why after a little while, but that is very important. Next slide. Okay, backgrounds and backdrops. Typically what you're after is I'm out to take a picture to document the work, so I don't want a backdrop that is going to distract from the piece. I don't want loud orange. I don't want purple. I don't want blue. I typically want something solid and neutral, like white is one of my favorites. Black if it's a very, very light object, but even then, white's okay, or gray. That's my 3 standards. I do have, just pull this up for a second. I do have a roll here that I've got white. And when I bought the white, it came with blue and it came with red. And I've got gray at home, and then it's also the black. So it comes in a lot of different colors. I have this on a cardboard roll so that when it came folded up, and they all had creases. I ironed them, and now I just roll them on here to keep the creases out. If you've got creases on your backdrop, it's going to really you're going to see it in the picture. So by doing something like this, it will keep it off of keep the creases out. Okay, back to the slide. Okay, gradient backgrounds. You can use gradient backgrounds if you want. The problem with those is it may distract from the piece itself, but it makes for some nice dramatic pictures, and so you might want to do that. So most of what I'm telling you here, don't take it as a gospel or a rule. You can violate every single one of these almost, and still get good pictures. It's kind of a nylon. You can come up and look at it later, but it's kind of a slick nylon on one side and kind of a felty feel on the other side. So you can get a shiny or a matte kind of a reflection on there. Okay, there's a reference file, but you can get them at Adorama or B&H Photo. There's a number of, maybe even Amazon. Next slide. Okay, once you've got your light box selected and your backdrop put in there, putting the background in there is kind of important. You don't want to have the backdrop being part of your picture. You want it to just kind of disappear. So typically what you do is you have your backdrop start at the back wall, do a nice lazy curve down onto the floor so that it basically has an even transition and you don't see creases and lines. Placing the object in there, you'll want to place it away from the back wall, and the reason is to keep the shadows to a minimum. If the shadows show up, you want them to be on the floor of the light box, not projected on the background. Otherwise, you go, oh, is that a shadow? Or it distracts from the object more that way. Next slide. Oh, object orientation. When you put the objects in there, you're going to have your camera, and and you're looking at the object and you frame it. You don't want it sitting direct horizontal, straight up and down, and square to the camera. It just looks, I don't know, too rigid. Putting it at a weird slight angle, it looks a little more natural that way. And the one picture up in the upper right has that ribbon on it. I took a bunch of pictures at the Hunt County Fair of all of the things that were put in there, and they all had ribbons. And so I was just taking the pictures using this light box, and I had a number of the ribbons going straight out from the object. And it looked like the object had a tongue going, ah! And putting them at an angle, it just looks so much better. And having it kind of like just tossed there, it just looks more natural. So now, that said, you want to do a platter. You can get little stands and things to make platters or to put a platter on. Platters, quite often, you want to take a picture of straight on. Otherwise, you might want to do a slight angle. But so, again, I just said you want them to be at angles, not all the time. Sometimes you do want to do it straight on. But so, and it's really, use your eye and see what looks good to you. Next slide. Okay, camera and lenses. Any camera, any lens will work. Okay, if your camera has very little way to configure it, you might not have all the utility that you've got. If your lens is a wide-angle lens, it may cause you some problems because you're going to basically with digital cameras. Now I'm talking mostly digital cameras here. You want to use all the pixels in the camera as much as you can. There's no sense in taking a picture with a big, wide, empty background and a little tiny picture there that you're going to have to zoom in on. So you want to have use the most pixels. So you want to zoom in as close as you can to the object. Okay, so with a wide-angle lens, you're going to have to get real close to the object. And when you do that, you end up having distortion. So wide-angle lens, not real good to use, but you can use short lenses, but not big wide angle. The longer focal length lenses are good because you can sit back a little bit and have a little more room so that the lights aren't going to get in the way. Zoom lenses are not as sharp as fixed focus lenses. So if you have a 105 millimeter lens that's no zoom to it, you're going to get very sharp pictures. Zoom lens, not going to be as sharp. That said, zoom lenses are a whole lot more convenient to use, and that's what I always use. Okay, so just a little side there. Last note, if your camera and lens has vibration reduction, if you put it on a tripod, turn that off. Vibration reduction, it has a little motor in there that just sits there and vibrates a lens in the exact opposite way the camera is vibrating. If the camera's sitting on a tripod, it's not vibrating, but that little thing just sits there and wants to vibrate anyway, and it will cause the picture to be a little less clear. So turn it off when it's on a tripod. Okay, next slide. Okay, for the tripod, you do want to use a tripod. It doesn't have to be expensive or a big heavy-duty monster like this one. It just has to be something that will hold your camera and keep it from shaking and moving around. And you can get those for under $100, and they're just perfectly fine. Okay, typically what you want to do is you want the tripod as close as it needs to be for your lens that you're using, so that when you are looking at your object, you will be able to frame the object and get it maybe 80% of this of the in the frame, basically anywhere 75% of the filling 75% of the frame or so that you use a lot of your pixels. Okay, now for the orientation of your camera, for most wood turnings, what you'll want is and go ahead and go to on me. You'll want the camera to be at a slight be above the object, so that you're going to take a picture of the front of the object as well as see the back edge of the object. That gives your eye, when you take the picture, it says, oh, this is a three-dimensional object, because if you sit there and you take a picture and it looks like that, okay, all you see is a blue bar. And you go, oh, he painted a piece of wood, okay. Down like this, now you see the back edge, and you go, oh, that's a bowl. Okay, how much above or down or below you go is really up to you, and it depends on the piece. So, but basically, you do want the camera sitting up, looking down, so you get a good feel for the three-dimensional part of the camera. Now, the other thing is, like this one, you want the camera so that it is not tilted to the right or the left. That'll cause you some problems later. Okay, go back to the slides. Okay. Oh, okay. Next slide. It's time for a commercial. Okay. Tripods are notorious for having really bad aiming capability. Most tripods you get, it's to aim the camera up, down, right, left, it's really clunky. And it can take a lot of your time, and if you're trying to get a small object to fill 80% of your frame, you got a lot of messing around with the tripod head and controls. So I have found, actually this is for my binoculars, and then I realized, oh, it works great on my camera. This comes from Orion Telescope. It is a small, they call it a precision aligning adapter or something like that. And it's set up so that you can basically, you put it between the tripod and the camera, and you just rough aim it, and then you use these they're threaded knobs to move the camera high precision back and forth. And if you'll look at this one, I'm turning it quite a bit, but boy, it's very, very smooth and very precise. And I've been using this for quite a few years, and if you they cost $45, and if you take a lot of pictures on a tripod that you need some precision, well worth every penny of it. So enough of that. Go to the next slide. That's my, and if you want, I can send it around, or yeah, here, let's send it around. Just please make sure I get it back. Okay. So now we got the camera on the tripod. How do you set up the camera? Okay, again, raw image files. What they are is your camera, it is all of the information that it gets from the camera sensor in one file. Nothing has been left out. Okay, that gives you the most flexibility in post-processing, and it is just a good thing to have, to use. JPEG, if you get JPEGs off your camera, if your camera just poops out a JPEG, your camera has already compressed that and thrown away a lot of the information. You'll never get it back. So by getting the raw file out, you'll get the best quality you can possibly get. Okay, I recommend it highly. And if your camera does not have the capability to give you raw files, that's okay. You can still work with the JPEGs. Just get high quality JPEGs. But again, I like raw files. Huge. These raw files on this is a Nikon D80. It's a 16 megapixel or so, something like, I think it's 16 megapixels. And the files are roughly 16 megapixel or megabytes in size. Whereas a JPEG, you can get them down half a meg, 100K, so depending on your compression. that is what you'd want to do, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. Okay, so bottom line is, if you can use RAW format, do it. Otherwise, JPEG's okay. Focusing. Using autofocus, if your camera has autofocus, go ahead and use it. The only reason you want to use manual focus is if you need to control your depth of field better. And I'll get to that in a little bit. So use your camera's autofocus. Shutter release. I typically use a wired remote, that comes in here, and so you can, snap the shutter without touching the camera. If you are sitting there trying to touch the camera and use your finger to hit the shutter, it will shake the camera and it will introduce blur. If you don't want to use, going back to the, if you don't want to use a wired remote, maybe a wireless remote I don't like using that because usually it's infrared and you've got to do it from the front of the camera. And so, but if you don't have that, try the remote or the self-timer. And just hit the self-timer, stand back for a couple of seconds. By then the camera will have quit vibrating as much, and then it'll take the picture and you're good to go. But try not to use your finger to do that unless you've got real steady fingers. Next. Okay. White balance setting. Most of the digital cameras now will allow you to choose different white balance settings. Well, what the white balance setting does is it removes the color cast by using non-white light. So if your camera has a custom white balance, it allows you to set the white balance inside the camera, and you just say, I'm going to take a picture of something white or neutral gray, and then you tell the camera that's white, and it will do all the adjustments in the camera so that from then on out, it will convert your lighting from yellow or heavy blue. It'll do what it takes so that whites look like white. Okay, if you don't have a custom white balance, check your manual. If you do have it, use it. It will make a big difference. If you don't have it, auto is okay, but it can make mistakes. The cameras don't have a good way to figure out, oh, that's the light you're using is blue, and then correct for it. If you're taking a picture of something that is very blue, the camera doesn't know that the object is blue versus being illuminated with blue light. And so it guesses. So auto can make mistakes. Yes, read through your manual. If it allows you to set a custom white balance, it'll tell you what the procedure is, and it's a good thing to do. And I do it every time I sit down with my light box. Even though I've done it 15 times before, with the same lights, I do it again each time, just to make sure I don't screw it up. Next. Okay, and here's some why the white balance matters. What I did is I took this picture of this bowl using these daylight fluorescents, and I just set the camera to a different white balance. That's not a fair comparison, but it does show you that the different white balances will give you different color casts. And you're welcome to take a look at the bowl that's there and see, but I personally like the one that's custom white balance. It just looks closer to the actual bowl. Auto is not bad. Direct sunlight is not bad because I was using the sunlight balanced fluorescence, but these others look terrible. So go ahead and anyway, so that's auto white balance or the white balance issue. Go ahead. Okay, and this gets back to it. When I start setting down sit down for the first pictures using my light box, I will use a color card and a gray card and take a picture of it. These will help me to do the corrections later when I'm doing the post processing, and this is a good thing to do. Do you have to do it? No, but it's just a helpful tool. Okay, normally you just need to do it once, but if you end up changing the lighting, you need to take another picture, redo your white balance, and if you change your camera lenses will change your light, change the color cast. Adding filters like a polarizer, I'm going to have to do it again. And oddly enough, if you change the backdrop on a reflective light box. That light is reflecting off the backdrop as well as off of the sides, and that can change your color balance. So you just have to be careful when you're messing around with color balance. And go ahead and no, not necessarily. Yeah, you and I got some on that. So next slide. Okay, time for a commercial. This is something I ran across, and it's called a color checker passport. And well, you don't have to go on me. It's here. But what it provides is it provides some standardized color blocks, as well as an 18% gray card in a nice protective self-standing little whatever this is, booklet kind of thing. They're not cheap. They cost around $100. But if you take a lot of pictures and need a color card on a regular basis, it's hard to mess up, and they work really well. It comes with software that you can use that will create a profile for Photoshop, so that you can just one-shot color balance. I don't use it that way, but I do take the pictures and use it to color balance manually. So anyway, I prefer not to pass this around because you get fingerprints or something on it, and it's not as good anymore. So, but if you really want to see it, I'll show it to you afterwards. Next. Okay. Exposure settings. How do you set up the camera to take the picture? Well, there are three important things. For any given amount of light, you have the ISO setting, the aperture setting, and the shutter speed. ISO setting is the sensitivity of your sensor. The higher the number, the more sensitive it is. The more sensitive it is, the more noisy it can get, and I'll talk about that. And on the next slide, actually. No, not yet. Aperture is the diaphragm opening inside the lens, and that's basically, and this is the one that confuses people a lot. But it's F numbers, and so F4, F10, or 11, or F16, or F22. The larger the number, the smaller the aperture. Okay, forget it there. The larger the number, the larger your depth of field. And that's the important thing. And depth of field is basically the area of your scene that is in focus. And I've got a shot that shows that one also. Shutter speed is just the duration that the shutter is open. And the faster that is, the less blur you're going to get, but also the less light that comes in. Okay, basically out of ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, choose two. The third one is set by the amount of light that you've got, to a point. Next slide. Okay, here's an example of sensor noise. And the two pictures on the left-hand side are taken with ISO 100. The two on the right are ISO 1600. And if you look at especially the lower right one, see how you see grain in there. Okay, that's what happens when you increase your ISO real high. You get noise or grain show up, and so you're trying to document your objects and take the best picture you can. ISO 1600 ain't the way to do it. You want a low ISO number. Next slide. Okay, lens aperture controls your depth of field, and get the handout and read through this. I don't want to try and explain it again because I always get tongue-tied. But the lower left, or the picture on the left, is done with an f32. Which gives you a large depth of field. And if you'll notice, the front of the object is in focus, the rear of the object is in focus, and both sharp. On the right, it's done at f5.6, and there the front of the edge is sharp and in focus, just like the other picture, but the back has gotten soft and is not in focus. That's depth of field. You want to have the most depth of field. You don't want to go take a picture of your object and have it fuzzy and out of focus in the back. So that's why you want a large F number when you take these pictures. Next. Okay, so the important settings in my book is use a low fixed ISO value, like ISO 100. A lot of cameras have auto ISO. I steer clear of that because the camera, when you put it on auto, the camera makes its own decision what it wants to use, and it will change based on some rules that you don't know. So I usually like to use a fixed number. And then I set the smallest aperture the lens will provide. Literally, the smallest one. Anything less than that, you're giving up depth of field. And then I just let the shutter speed be what it's going to be. And quite often, I end up taking pictures with a 2-second shutter exposure. I mean, it takes a long time. Okay, I typically set the shutter speed to whatever the camera's internal light meter says to use. Not the optimal way to do it. Yes? Well, I've got a whole thing on that one. But basically, if it's on auto, no, you don't know. It may tell you. It depends on the camera. But I've got something that'll explain some of that. Okay, when I say use the shutter speed that the internal light meter says to use, typically that's not the optimal way to do it because you're in a non-traditional mode here, a very white background and a small object, and it's going to fool the light meter. But I found that it works if you just use whatever the light meter says to use, and I don't try and overthink it. I fix it later using Photoshop. Okay, but if you really want to make sure you get your light, you want to have it properly exposed. And so one way to do that, you can bracket, which is take 3 pictures. One right where it says to be, one where you overexpose, and one where you underexpose, and then pick the best one. You know, that's one way you can do it. But overall, the most critical setting is your aperture. Use the largest F number that you can get so you get the best depth of field. Next slide. Okay, exposure modes. This might talk to you what you've got. Most of these cameras, they got full auto, shutter priority, aperture priority, sports mode, all these different landscape, portrait modes, and a manual mode. They all work. However, they do different things, and you'll get different results. If you've got full auto, camera sets everything, and it sacrifices depth of field to get good shutter speed. Aperture priority is a good shutter or good thing to use because there you set the aperture, and it chooses this. Then it says, "Oh, okay, you need this shutter speed," and it's usually going to let you do that. Sometimes the camera says, no, I'm still not going to take a picture. So aperture priority has problems, but that's the best mode, automatic mode to use. Shutter priority, you set the shutter speed, it chooses the aperture, and you have no control over depth of field. All of those target modes, landscape, sports, all that stuff, you have no clue what aperture it's going to set. Steer clear of those. Manual mode is my favorite. That's all I ever do when I'm on the tripod. And there you set your aperture and shutter speed manually. And that one you have full control. So you basically, once you get to know what you're doing, you know what you're going to get, and the camera will not override you. So that's why I like manual mode. It's a little more work, but it's less potential for screwing up. If you don't use a manual mode or your camera doesn't provide that, aperture priority is your next best. Next. Okay, a few other exposure issues. I mentioned that the lighting is not optimal if you use the camera internal light meter. The light meters are based on average reflectance of 18, whatever is illuminating your subject, 18% of the light is reflected back to the camera. That's how it's been done for years. Extremely light-colored scenes, like if you're out in the snow, it's going to say, "Oh, there's a huge amount of light there," and it's going to set your shutter speed a lot faster, and you're going to get underexposed pictures. If it's a real dark object, like you're taking a picture of an ebony bowl, it's going to say, "Oh man, it's real dark," and it's going to let your shutter stay open longer, and you're going to overexpose. And so there are some issues there. And bracketing can help you. But bottom line is, most of the cameras have sufficient latitude to get you through almost every situation. Okay, zoom lenses have a variable f-stop, and for example, the one I use, it is f3.5 to 5.6. Well, that's the largest opening. Basically, if you're zooming in on something, it will have a different f-stop value than if you're zoomed out. And the maximum f-stop that the lens will give you also changes depending on your zoom setting. So what this means to you is, when you're getting ready to take a picture, frame first, set your exposure later. Because if you sit there and set your exposure and say, oh, I got to tighten up a little bit, and you tighten up, and all of a sudden you'll see that light meter, it'll move on you, and you say, oh, then you got to go reset it. So frame it first, then shoot. Next one. Okay, polarizers. If you've got something really shiny, like this big, huge ball over here, that's got a lot of reflections on it, using a polarizer can help reduce the reflections. They're easy to use. It's just a filter, screws on the front of the lens, and you spin it until the reflections go away or at least minimized. Okay, you'll want to use a circular polarizer. The old style linear polarizers mess up your light meter in the camera. The only issue of the polarizer is it can change your color balance. So if you put a polarizer on, you'll want to make sure you adjust for your color balance. And there's a couple of pictures here, one with a polarizer and without, and you'll see that, yes, it didn't get rid of all of the reflections, but it did help quite a bit, but it also put a slight blue tint to the background. So, next. Okay, my typical setup. Okay, I have, as you see, I've got the solid light box. I've got the light shed, and the soft boxes. I'll use if I'm taking a huge number of pictures, like at SWAT or at our meetings. I would prefer to use the solid reflective box. It's got fewer ways to screw up. You don't have a lot of opportunity to make changes, so you just turn on the light and go. But from something I want to do something better at home, I would prefer to use those soft boxes. They are very nice. Otherwise, I'll use the light shed, which are kind of a pain to use and get the lights set right. Anyway, I always use that precision adapter that's going around. I always use a wired remote, and I always will set vibration reduction off, autofocus, polarizer if I have to. Next one. Always use raw. My cameras give me a raw image file. I always use that. I haven't taken a JPEG off of my camera in years. I have that feature turned off. So if you want me to give you a JPEG, I take a raw image, process it, save it as a JPEG, and then I'll give it to you. I use a low ISO setting and a manual exposure, and I set the custom white balance every single time I start taking pictures. Okay, then for each picture, I'll frame the object, set my aperture, set the shutter speed, shoot the picture. Now, if I'm taking pictures of somebody else's work, like at a meeting or at SWAT, I'll take two pictures. I'll take one of the object, and the second picture will be a little note that tells me who did it and whatever else, so I can use it for annotating or sending it to somebody or whatever. Next one. Okay. Some of my reasoning, again, the light box, when I use the solid one, it's just simple. It's easy to use. Manual exposure, I'm just used to it. If I tried to use aperture priority, I'd constantly go, did I do it right? Am I screwing up? So I do the one I'm used to. If you're used to aperture priority, keep using it. If you can learn manual, it's a good way to go, but you don't have to do it. I don't use exposure compensation or bracketing. Not because it's a bad idea, but because if I'm taking pictures like at SWAT, I shot over 1,500 pictures in 2 days. If I were going to do bracketing, that would have turned to 4,500 pictures that I would have had to gone through. I ain't doing that. So it's laziness on my part. But if you're only taking a few pictures, bracketing can be a good thing. Okay. Next. Okay, so that's setting up, taking pictures. Is that any questions on this? I'm about ready to launch into photo processing. And I hope I'm not, just tell me if I'm going too long here. Okay, most of the photos that you take will have to be processed to make them look good. Even just any number of little tweaks will have to be made. Before you get done or start though, you'll want to calibrate your monitor. The one that you're going to be doing the processing and looking at it, you want to make sure that it's giving you good colors and that its intensity is right. Check your manual or your operating system to see what features they've got that'll help you do that. Okay, now as far as the software packages, most cameras will send you something to do. It may be some cheesy little program or it may be some good program comes with the camera, or they'll tell you what to get. GIMP is I'm not even going to, some image manipulating program or whatever, but it's free. Okay, Photoshop Elements and Lightroom. I'm an Adobe freak, so you're going to hear me saying that stuff, Adobe products, but I like them. But I'm also on a Mac, so I don't know what. I know there's a lot of good programs for a PC. I just don't know what they are, but they're out there that are fairly inexpensive. Or you can go all the way and get Photoshop and spend $700 or $800 and go whole hog. Next. Doesn't matter which one you use, okay? But again, I'm into using raw images, and the thing about camera or the Photoshop Camera Raw is it brings up. If you look at this picture here on the left-hand side, there's all those little thumbnails. You can hit the button above there. It's a little hard to see, but it says Select All. You can select all of your photos that you just dragged into Photoshop and color balance in one step. You can't do that with JPEGs. JPEGs, you got to do them onesie-twosie. If you're lucky, you've got a batch processing program that you can kick off that will do it. But in addition to color balancing, you can do a lot of one-step things to all your pictures at once. And while I was at SWAT one year, I actually loaded up almost 500 pictures into Camera Raw and color balanced them all. Boom. So that's why I like raw photos. To do that with JPEGs would have taken me all night. And so, yes, they're still raw files until you save them. And I save it as a JPEG later. So next slide. Okay, what I typically do on all of these, I'll start out and there's a auto levels or auto correct or something. It's just a one shot. Do the best you can. I always do that. That corrects for most of your main problems. Doesn't always get your color balance right. Doesn't always get your exposure right. But it does make a lot of good corrections. So I do that first. Then I correct the white balance. And to correct the white balance, you'll see here, I've got the picture of the color passport guide that I took. I will use that to help correct the color. And there's a number of different tools, depending on your software package, to actually set your color balance correctly. But the little color wheel that I have here is the red circle over there. It's got two sliders. One's called tint, one's called temperature. That's what I typically will use a lot of times to set my color balance. And what that's doing is in the little color wheel, there's the black dot is in the green area. What that's saying is that the white light is actually greenish, and you need to correct that greenish tint in your whites over to be white again. So you drag the text, the tint, and the temperature around until it moves that dot down to where the center is. Okay. Now, that also shows you why you don't want to have two different colors of light. If you had a light that's slightly green and a light that's slightly red illuminating your object, which one do you correct for? Well, you can't correct for both of them. And so that's why you're really worried about ambient light when you're doing this. Try and minimize the ambient lights when you're doing that. Okay, next. After that, I'll adjust the exposure. Once the color's set right, and oh, that didn't come out very well. Oh well, it's the breaks. what I'll do, okay, these three pictures down here on the bottom are actually were screenshots out of Photoshop, and you can see that the first picture was no adjustments, and it was very underexposed. That was because it was taken from a much larger field of view. I did crop these a bit. And it was a lot of white around this thing, and it says, oh, too much light, and it underexposed the picture automatically for me. So it comes out very dark. But I hit the autocorrect, and boom, the levels came up quite a bit. Still not enough. So the way I do my correction is I find the brightest part of the photograph, and I increase the exposure until you just start to lose details in the bright area. That's about the best you can get as far as your exposure. Next slide. Okay, after that, I'll adjust my fill light or shadows. Depends on the software package you use, but most of them, when you're doing with raw photos and sometimes JPEGs, it'll allow you to increase the lighting in the dark, shadowy areas. And so here I've added some fill light, and then I've added the clarity. And what clarity is, it's a contrast adjustment that just works on midtones. And it's magic. I don't know how it actually works, but it makes details pop out, and you can see from the middle to the far right picture, it made the grain lines really pop out. So I always toss that in. Next. The next step is I'll just crop and straighten the pictures. And if the camera was leaning a little bit right or left, you just basically have to twist your crop so that it will straighten the camera. Last one, or next one, is the last step, dust and spot removal. Okay, Photoshop has some excellent dust and spot removal, and there's arrows are pointing to a lot of dust marks that are on my sensor. I just need to get my sensor cleaned, but because I haven't cleaned my sensor, I get to spend a lot of time getting rid of the dust spots. But as you can see, it does a very good job of making them disappear. You can also remove blemishes from the piece that were there that you don't want to show people, but that's kind of cheating, but it has been done. Next slide. Okay, that's pretty much all I do, is what I've listed there. You can adjust your contrast, blacks, vibrance and saturation. There's all sorts of things you can do. I don't do them. Okay, because it takes too much time, and B, you don't need it. Once you've gone through the basic things that I've shown you here, you're going to have a fairly decent picture if you've done things correctly. And you don't have to mess with all these others. And I never apply artistic effects because I am not out for something I'm going to make a pretty picture to hang in a museum. I want the object to look good without faking it, any more than I have to at least. Next. Annotation. Sometimes putting words in your picture so that you know who did it, when it was done, whatever, is a good idea. But when you do it, you don't want the text to be a whole paragraph. You want the text to be innocuous and not take away from the object. You don't want it to be huge. You don't want it to be bright colored. So just something innocuous that gives the information if somebody wants to read it. But you really don't want to detract from your object. So next slide. Here's a few examples. Bad, so-so, not too bad, not a one of them is good. Okay, I don't know how to put a good annotation, but you do need annotation sometimes. But I'll let you get the slide and look and see why I don't like any of them, but I do it nonetheless. I don't use Photoshop to do that. I use Preview. It's a Mac program to put my annotation on. I'm sure there are other programs that can be done in using the Mac or using the PC, but I don't know what they are. Next slide. Okay. Saving your files. Okay. Again, I do everything in RAW mode. And then when I'm done with all my edits, I will save it to a JPEG or a TIFF. Okay. If you start with a JPEG, you do not want to compress it any more than you have to until the last minute. Okay. So typically, if you're using RAW mode, you don't want to save your picture in the RAW mode. Well, you will save it in the RAW mode, but you don't want to leave it in the RAW mode because nobody can read it. AAW doesn't want your raw file. They might be able to deal with it, probably can. But you don't want to send that to a friend because it's huge. So you do want to change it to something useful. Okay, JPEG is a universal. That's what I typically go to. And it is compressed, and you do lose data, but everybody can see it. TIFF is pretty much lossless most times, and it's also a universal, but it's huge. It will give you a 16 megabyte file. I mean, they're huge. Whereas JPEGs, you can get those down to where they're manageable. Okay, PNG is another format similar to TIFF, and it's kind of compressed TIFF files, but it's not universally supported, so I kind of steer clear of those. So TIFF and JPEG is typically what you'll want to go for. If you're sending a picture to AAW Magazine, TIFF is what they'll like. They really like TIFF. I went through that once. They'll take a JPEG without too much trouble, but they'd rather you send them a TIFF because that means they can then go and manipulate the program or manipulate everything to look the best that they can. Okay, we got there. Resolution versus file compression. Okay, this is something most people don't understand. Okay, resolution is how many pixels, and by the way, we're almost done. Resolution is how many pixels there are in the photograph, and it's based on the sensor. For example, this guy is a 16 megapixel sensor, and by golly, whatever the format it comes out, I don't know, 4,000 something to by 3,000 or whatever, you multiply them out, it's 16 megapixels, 16 megabytes file sizes. Okay. File compression is something your software does, and it will take your file and it will compress it down using magical techniques that I don't even want to go into, but it uses data redundancy inside the data, and it says, oh, we don't need all that, we can squish it down a little bit. Well, reducing your resolution from big down to 640 by 480 or whatever it might be will help reduce your file size. If you're worried about, I don't want to send a 16 megabyte file to my grandmother, you want to send her 100K or whatever. So you can reduce the resolution, or you can reduce or increase your compression. Either one will work, but they do different things, and they'll affect you differently. Reducing the resolution reduces the number of pixels, which reduces the amount of information that you can see, and if you try to zoom in, you'll end up with square boxes popping up much quicker. If you increase your compression, you still have the same number of pixels. You can keep zooming in all day long like it was the original picture, but what will happen is you'll see more blurring and the color will get smeared in there. So you got the same number of pixels, just the data looks a little funny. So they do different things. The resolution and compression that you want to use is whatever is suitable for what you're going to use it for. If you're going to AAW Magazine or another magazine, you don't want to do any compression. You don't want to reduce your resolution. Give them the best you can give them and let them do the changes for you. If you're going to make prints, depending on the number of dots per inch on your printer and the size of the print, you can go anywhere from 640 by 480 all the way up. And just look online, they'll tell you what's appropriate. If you're putting something out on the internet, 640 by 480 or 1024 by 768 is perfectly fine. And we'll fix that later. Yeah, okay, no problem. And there you can use some moderate compression. Go to the next slide. And it's pictures. And examples of what compression and resolution will give you. And there's 4 pictures. They're all taken from the same picture. It's a small cutout from the same picture that was originally a 16 megapixel photograph, and I took out a little bit out of the middle and I blew it up. The upper left is full resolution, very low compression, and it looks pretty good. The upper right, I left the resolution alone and I compressed the heck out of it, and it went from the original file size was 12 megabytes, almost 13 megabytes, took it down to 845K, a lot of compression, and you look at them and you go, I don't see much difference. and I don't. I think high compression is perfectly fine. The lower one, I left it at low compression. I didn't compress it very much, but I dropped the resolution to 1024, and the file size is 1 megabyte when I saved it, but it looks blurry. Okay, and I think from even here you can see it looks blurry. And the lower right, I just put that in to show you how bad it can be if you really want to shoot yourself in the foot. Bottom line on this is, in general, if you're trying to reduce your file size, use compression first. And if that doesn't do it, then reduce your resolution. And you'll get better quality photos that way. Next. Okay. I'm going to buzz this one. Organization, you might consider using, organizing your files is important if you take a lot of pictures. You know, putting them in, rather than having them slung all over the place, put them in folders that are topical. Use folder names, don't use DSC42. You know, put a name that means something like SWAT or AAW, whatever. And make backup copies. If you take all the effort to take the pictures, make a backup copy and save it somewhere in case your computer crashes or something so that you don't lose your data. Also, the bottom point is Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, is a project flow software. And go ahead to the next slide. And oh, sorry, it wasn't that one. But anyway, it's a project flow that does organization as well as editing. Another reason I like RAW files, doing the camera RAW, it allows you to specify unique file names, and you can say, oh, March, Dallas Woodturners, and you can put all sorts of stuff in there and have them all sequentially numbered. You can also select whether you want to do JPEG or TIFF and how much compression to do. And so it's very easy to do where you can have 500 pictures and give them all the same basic name, have them sequentially numbered, and all of them saved in the same format, and then you just hit go and walk away, and it'll do it all for you. So it's another reason I like RAW. Next one. Here's the other commercial. It's on Lightroom, and Lightroom it's a organizing program, and it allows you to create libraries of your photos. And now these aren't wood turnings, but well, one I missed, but you can get an idea of what it will look like. This is just a screenshot, and you can put all sorts of pictures in there, and it includes an editor, so you can go and change your white balance and do all the things that you normally do with Photoshop, almost. It's not quite as powerful as using Photoshop, but for what most of you people will be doing, it is more than sufficient. A lot of professionals use Lightroom instead of Photoshop. It costs around $150. It's an excellent program, but do you need it? No, but it's there if you, I just thought I'd bring it up because now I do have it, I have used it, but I prefer using Photoshop and my own organizing techniques, but I still haven't warmed to it yet, but I do have it. Next one. As promised, there are some reference items that here, the light sheds, soft boxes, the backdrops, all this stuff, some information on where to get some of this stuff and how much it costs as of this month. Next, yeah. And here's my Adobe page. But the one note at the, 2 notes at the bottom, Adobe has gone to a pay per month thing, so you pay $10 a month and you can get Photoshop. That's not me, but it's actually not that bad. It beats paying $700 for the software, $10 a month, and that you get the latest and greatest. And if you're a Mac user, Apple had Aperture and iPhoto. They've just removed them from their inventory. You can no longer buy them. So if you have a copy of Aperture or a copy of iPhoto and you like it, keep it. Don't let it go away because you cannot replace it. And the next, pardon me? You can buy Photoshop 6. I just did.
On eBay, maybe.
No, you can buy it from Adobe. Oh, you can do it. You can do an upgrade. Okay, yeah, yeah, and I just upgraded to 6, to the latest one, and yeah, and so, but it's really not that bad if you think about it. It's going to cost you, I think it was like $800 tax, title, and license to upgrade to Photoshop 6. That's 80 months, almost 7 years of month to month. So it's not that bad. I just like to have a copy of my own. I'm just that way. Okay, the last slide. And any questions? Have I bored you? Have I talked your ear off? Okay. As I mentioned, I took all the slides and I scrunched them down. I allowed my preview app to compress highly these very slides into the PDF, and so the PDF will be online soon at the Dallas. I'm not sure of that, or you feel free to send it out to everybody if you want. It's 1.8 megabytes, and you'll have every slide that's here without the commentary. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I believe I'm planning on being here on Saturday, and I will bring all my gizmos, and maybe even the one that may broke. I don't know. I hope it didn't break. And John Holderman has the light box I actually used at SWAT that is kind of an interesting design, and you're going to bring that also. Feel free to bring your camera. If you do, either know how to use it or bring your manual, and we'll see if we can set you up with a light box if you want to take some pictures of something you want to bring with your camera to get a feel for it. Now, if 50 people do this, it could take a long time. But if there's just a few people who really want to try this, we'll give it a whirl and see how it goes. And so feel free to stop by. I hope to be here by 10, maybe 9:30. Coming from Greenville, so and I sleep late. So, but I think that does it. Any other questions?